It's time for the wit and wisdom of your favourite wordsmith, Kel Richards. Welcome back, Kel. The budget's the big story, so let's start with a term that has become ubiquitous this week. The term, or the phrase, is in the black. What does it mean? Where does it come from?
Comes from the history of accounting. If you go back to the 19th century, then accounts were kept in ledgers with pens dipped in ink and kept by hand, and standard account books were kept in black, right? And then towards the end of the 19th century, some clever accountant thought, when this goes into deficit, I have to make it stand out, and they started using red ink for that. And that generated the expressions 1907, the expression in the red, meaning really in trouble and in deficit, appears in the English language. And then in 1923, the expression we're hearing about this budget, in the black, first turned up. Both in America, because they're very American sort of phrases. But there you are, from the history of accounting.
There you go. The accountant's making a big contribution. Here's another financial term of sorts, the dole. What's the origin of calling it that?
Well, it's very old. It's over 1,000 years old. It goes back to the days when the Anglo-Saxons spoke Old English. And the word started out as a verb. To dole something meant to give it, often as charity. And then what was given was called the dole. So it's that very old Germanic word. And if you look at the word deal, which comes from the same period, you can see the relationship to deal out, to dole out. It's that group of words. And when we trace them back to Anglo-Saxon, we can't trace them any further, but that's where it comes from. To dole out, to give out, is the dole.
That makes sense. It's been mentioned that because Prime Minister Albanese has now attended a royal coronation, he has now got the title Esquire. What is an Esquire, and does Mr Albanese qualify to be one of them?
Well, it depends. Originally, an esquire was an armour bearer for a knight, but it just ended up over the centuries becoming an honorific that was given to any male. Basically, any bloke could be called an esquire, except in law. There is a legal use of squire, and I looked it up in Blackstone. Blackstone's commentaries on the English law. And Blackstone, this is the 1826 edition. Oh, yes, very light reading for someone like you. And, yeah, I'm sure you sit up in bed at night reading Blackstone. The 1826 edition, he says, the only people who could be called a squire are people who've been so designated by the king. So that's why there was a tweet saying that, yes, if you've been to the coronation, you're designated a squire by the king and you can have that title. But there's a difference between legal English and standard English. And in standard English, the expression has long been hijacked and could be applied to anyone. I can remember envelopes that came to any sort of bloke and they had Esquire at the end of his name, except in America. That never happened in America. In America, Esquire was claimed by the legal profession. So they were the only ones who ever used it in America. So it could be Perry Mason Esquire, counsellor at law, whereas in Britain and Australia, any bloke could be an Esquire.
And lastly, there's been talk that supporters of The Voice are using emotional blackmail to get people to vote yes. What is emotional blackmail, and are those concerned over its use with The Voice correct in using it in that way?
Well, the blackmail part's fairly straightforward. Very old word, comes from 1530. The mail part is an old Scottish word for a tribute payment, and blackmail just means it's illegal. It's that kind of tribute payment. Emotional blackmail is an expression coined in America in 1938, when you apply emotional pressure to people to agree to something. And recently, a supporter of The Voice actually put his hand up and said, "I'm not doing emotional blackmail," after he told us in the same article that it will be deleterious for Aboriginal families.
We've got to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thank you so much, Kel, for your wit and wisdom.